here. Somebody's out in the hallway.
Wedging. It's not the most interesting or exciting part of the throwing process for most, but for me, it is. The process of aligning the clay molecules helps me to bring my mind to the place where it needs to be. Wedging aligns the molecules within the clay, creating a uniform texture throughout the clay body, eliminating any air bubbles and lumps that could hinder the process. As I wedge, my mind goes blank, aligning itself in the center of my body, focusing on one thing: the clay. It is important to empty my mind of all that has happened, or will happen, in the day. As I come to know the clay, it becomes part of me. As I push, it resists, and together the clay and I create a medium for self-expression. I quickly learn from wedging how much force I'll need, the amount of water I'll need, and the time it will take. It is the beginning of a process. The beginning of the process is the learning of the notes. When a song is first picked up, it begins with the reading of a song. The song begins with a note, and the learning of the note begins with a scale. A scale is simply put as going through each component one at a time, learning and understanding the note until it becomes as much a part of me as does the clay. My muscles commit the note to memory and soon becomes second nature. My body becomes a pathway for the music, allowing each note to sound, drawing me in with each beat. My mind reacts in much the same way with music as it does with clay, blocking out all else, forming a connection with the only thing present, the music. This allows me to not only put all my energy into each note, but my emotion as well. When the clay is uniform in consistency, smooth, and free of all air bubbles, and as workable as possible, I am then ready to move on to the next step. I begin forming the clay into balls that can be easily used to throw. They must be round and smooth, as a sphere is much easier to throw than an irregular shape. Unlike most people who dance, I didn't start lessons when I was 5 years old. In fact, up until my sophomore year of high school, I never had the need to dance for people. I began learning to dance in that year's musical, Crazy for You. In the downtime, I hung out and watched as my friends messed around and practiced hip-hop moves. I began to teach myself these moves, and soon learned that I had the mind of a dancer. I was easily able to pick up steps and commit them to memory. When learning the steps of the dance, my mind, once again, goes blank. I simply absorb all steps and think of nothing but the rhythm and sounds made by my feet. Tap is essentially talking with your feet, repeating the shuffle ball change, flap ball change, ingrained in my mind, with the only other part of my body that can speak. As with music, muscles are trained until each step and motion becomes second nature. Once the clay is formed into balls, and my tools and water have been prepared, I sit down at the wheel and prepare to start the process. I search through the balls of clay until I find the one that will be the easiest to throw. I then slam the ball down onto the center of the wheel and start it spinning. I lean over the clay, clearing my mind of what has happened, what will happen, and what is happening. I can't think when throwing, or else I end up with a mess. I push against the clay, and it resists. Together, we form a unit, constantly working together, so we each take a shape that the other likes better. Working with the director as we block the scene and walk through each one is one of my favorite experiences. For most, it's the worst part. But seeing how each piece fits together and how the characters play off of each other within the scene is what I find to be the best part. Even memorizing lines is fun for me. Most people hate it, but working through a little at a time and forming the bonds between the actors is what is best to me. What really excites me is when I see all the pieces falling together and becoming a play, showing that all of our hard work and all of the hours that have been put into it are finally paying off. The time taken to wedge the clay will pay off when the time comes to center. Centering is the process in which you push the clay into an unwobbling lump spinning in the center of the wheel. Without a clear, centered mind, the clay will never become what I want it to be. I must work with the clay, persuading and pushing until finally I am ready to open it up.
I done had a fearful vision, now I'm gonna change my ways.
My family comes together to play music. We play bluegrass, but not strictly. We're always looking for new songs to cover, stretching from Green Day to the Beatles, from Bob Wills to the Turnpike Troubadours. Each of us is like the music we play. Completely different, yet at the same time, incredibly similar. We are constantly growing, learning from each other, and learning about each other. As each voice joins in, we add another layer to the bond between us, constantly adding until, somehow, we are more together than we are apart. Each of us is constantly learning the notes and scales that are continually added to the song of our family.
Saw the place where they were going, now I'm gonna change my ways.
In a story from ancient China, a nobleman is riding through his lands. He rides through a village and sees a potter who throws the most beautifully made pots. The noble stops and says, "How is it that you are able to make such beautiful pottery? The graceful curves make it almost seem alive." The potter replies, "What you are seeing is simply the outward beauty. I am more interested in what remains after they are broken." The peasant is saying in his way that a potter is not just forming the pot, but forming himself as well. Now it's time to open the curtain. It's essentially the final run-through, but actually, it's the performance. The process of going through the whole thing has come to this. The walkthroughs, the read-throughs, memorizing, and work has all come down to this. The feeling is bittersweet, but still, I clear my mind and lose myself to the character. The process begins to come to an end. I begin the song. The song speaks through me, and I'm no longer playing notes, but playing emotion. I lose myself as I work my way through the notes to the end. When I reach the end, I'm not really done. I still have my scales to play to cement the notes into me. I keep my mind clear as I pull the clay upwards into a cylinder. I thin the walls a little at a time, but in as few pulls as possible. I begin to finish the cylinder, smoothing the walls, creating an aesthetically pleasing lip, and putting those scales I spent all that time practicing into use. The dance has taken shape, becoming a mesmerizing piece of action that captivates audiences. Of course, I'm not done yet. I must still practice and learn the dance until actions become mindless. I inspect my work. It looks like it should. It's shaped correctly, and I think the thickness is right. I can see the results of my scales and how uniform the pot is. But there's always room for improvement. So, whenever I finish anything, I'm never really done. There's always something to improve, and that is done by playing my scales. Learning, practicing, becoming. By doing this, I have learned, and will continue to learn, the importance of scales.